we're already kind of past that point. The multifamily market is now bouncing around the bottom, and
Mm.
it's slated for, it's kind of poised for a recovery. So that supply is being absorbed by the market, that rental supply. And we're in a phase where you're going to start to see more upward pressure on rents pretty quickly here, like by the end of the year, I think.
Yeah, I think assuming that we maintain our current economic position, let's say, if we have some other variables in there,
there's a lot of variables.
Yeah, the unemployment rate going up or something like that, then that's going to impact incomes, aggregate demand, and then it's almost impossible to raise the rates, even if you have the supply side to where it needs to be to raise those rates, because at the end of the day, it's all about incomes. Whether it's a purchase, whether it's about, especially renting, the purchase, you got some wiggle room there with interest rates.
Right.
But when you're renting, it's like the rent is the rent. It's
Right.
You can't adjust that rent based on the Fed dropping interest rates or the 10-year Treasury coming down.
Right. Yeah. No. That there's a long lag for that, right? Because if some of that cheap money, when the Fed lowers rates, if some of it goes to developers, well, they'll build more apartment supply like they did 4 years ago when rates were super cheap.
Yeah.
But that delivers much later, so that doesn't create any softness in the rental market for a long lag. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess the main takeaway from someone watching this right now, because everyone needs a roof over their head. That's why I like talking about real estate sometimes as opposed to macro, because macro, it's fun talking about the Fed's balance sheet. But at the end of the day, everyone has to have a place to live.
Yeah.
So for the renters, looks like they've got some good news right now. For the buyers, it looks like it's still kind of a bad news situation, unless we were to get some softening economic data that could bring on a little bit more supply. And in that case, you would expect relief for the buyers pretty quick. And so I guess that would be the good news if you're considering purchasing a home right now. And in the interim, you can probably get a rental for a little cheaper than you could have last year while if you're waiting for prices to come down to buy.
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty fair thing to consider. We got to talk about some of these Trump policies, though, because they have just such far-reaching impact.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the first one I'd like to say, and George, you always like to talk about cross currents, right? So these are all cross currents.
Yeah.
The first one is Trump has now opened up a lot of timber development, right? So, for all the tree huggers, I just want to say I love trees too, but trees are a crop, okay? Nobody complains about, harvesting corn. They're going to harvest a lot more trees, okay? They're replanted. They're just a crop that takes longer to grow. That's all they are, is a crop, okay? And I know I'm going to get some hate mail on that one, but a tree is a crop, okay? And so Trump has opened all kinds of legislation to allow more timber production, because I don't think he wants to be so dependent on Canada for that. He also wants to open up federal lands for housing development. And, those are two things that would put downward pressure on prices of both houses and rents. But let's kind of, unpack them for a minute. So first of all, on the timber, that it would be largely overshadowed. So say lumber gets cheaper, right? Which it should get a little cheaper. So that's an input cost for development, but that would be largely overshadowed by the cost of all of the other component parts that would be tariffed. And if those tariffs are 25%, that is going to massively increase the cost of construction. And home builders, they are one of the slowest lead times of any kind of manufacturing. You can build a car much faster than a house, right? Once you've got the factory set up. So they really rely on those input costs being stable. So developers right now are freaking out. They don't know what to think of the Trump policies are causing some chaos for them, no question about it. And so those are two of the factors that would potentially make housing a little bit less expensive. But let's talk about the federal lands for a minute. Opening up federal lands for development would not significantly impact the price of an entry-level house, because the land cost for an entry-level house is so low. If you're buying a $400,000 house today, which nowadays is entry-level, the cost of that lot is maybe around $25,000. It's nothing. Okay. So even if say the federal government gave developers free land, okay, and here's some free land, go build some houses, they'd say, okay, thanks for the $25,000 discount. That's not going to like crash the market or anything. It's the construction materials and the labor that cost all the money. So
Right.
more cross currents. 13% or so of the construction workforce in America is illegal. That's what the
I was going
estimates.
to ask you about that.
Yeah. And so if they get deported, I mean, the average construction worker now is about 50 years old. That's insane. Like construction workers haven't been this old forever. Okay. It was always young guys in their 20s, pounding hammers and building houses.
Or
So
illegals.
or illegals, right?
Legal Hispanics or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, maybe there will be some program to bring them in legally, but the initial thing is deporting millions of people potentially. So that's going to hurt. That's going to make the cost of construction a lot higher.
Right.
And then you look at the simple fact of supply demand ratio. Those people deported, well, there's someone is their landlord. Okay. So they're renting cheap, low-end housing. And if they're deported, someone's losing their tenant.
Yeah.
So that's not going to be fun. So this is, the Treasury Secretary said the economy needs to detox. And that word detox, I think, is a perfectly fitting word for what's going on. This is, I think what Trump is doing overall is going to be pretty darn good for the country, but it's not going to be without some bumps in the road along the way.
Yeah, the economic term for detox is recession.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. That's a metaphor, yes.
Yeah. And I want to be clear that Jason is not stating his view on whether or not immigration or, Trump's immigration policies are good. I think you'd probably argue that the deportation is a good thing, but we're just simply looking at this through the lens of the housing market and how is this going to impact prices, not necessarily saying it's a net benefit or a net positive for society at large.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I believe countries should have borders and they should be enforced. I mean, it's reasonable.
Yeah,
it's a reasonable idea.
I tell you what's crazy though is I was in St. Bart's over the weekend, and Hughes Villa manager is a gal named Goldie. She's 22, 23 years old, and just a complete rock star employee. I mean, she's just got an amazing work ethic. She's incredibly intelligent, incredibly competent. She's just fantastic with the guests. She's everything you could want as an employee, and she's English. Right? And on top of that, and I'm just going to throw this out there just to show you this will give you an idea as to how hard it is for the right people to get into the United States. Her dad's a billionaire, literally. Her dad's a billionaire.
Yeah.
And we were sitting there talking about her wanting to go to the United States.
Gold card for $5 million.
Yeah. Yeah. But she was talking about how hard it is.
Yeah.
And how she's been trying to get a visa and she's been trying to do this and she's been doing it for like 2 or 3 years and she can't get a visa. And I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, my goodness gracious, if there is anyone that we want to come to the United States, it's Goldie, right? Or someone that's just going to be a huge benefit to society, most likely for the rest of their life. And it's like, let's get this person in, or maybe it's someone with a lot of capital, like Jason Hartman, a foreign version of Jason Hartman or something. It's going to create a lot of jobs. But unfortunately, we're making it very difficult. I'm not saying Trump did this, but prior to Trump, you were creating all these barriers for the people that really, really, really would add to society. We'd making these barriers for them to come in, while at the same time, all these people that might not be as positive, let's say, we're making it so easy for them that we're incentivizing them to come in by giving them a $10,000 debit card.
Right. No, it's stupid.
Insane.
Yeah. It's totally stupid. George, I'll tell you, I don't know if this is a comparison to Goldie, who you just mentioned, but about 20 years ago, I was on a Forbes investor cruise and I met this beautiful girl. We started dating, and she was Australian, blonde hair, blue eyes, smart, educated, college degree, everything, right? And she was dying to come to the US, okay? And, there's no way she could get in the US. And I was thinking, we're letting all these people across the borders with like really nothing to offer except, vote Democrat and also put downward pressure on prices of labor. Because they've hidden inflation from us for so many decades. One, by importing cheap goods from mostly China, and number two, by importing cheap labor mostly from south of the border. And these put downward pressure on inflation that hides the irresponsible government spending. And all of the now fraud and corruption we're learning about through Doge. That's the way they've been able to cover that up.
To be fair, they've kept housing prices affordable as well.
Hey guys, I'd like to personally invite each and every one of you to attend this year's Rebel Capitalist Live. This is the incredible conference I put on annually that helps you build a bulletproof portfolio. It helps you increase your personal freedom and liberty, and also it helps you increase the size of your network. In other words, you get to meet a lot of like-minded individuals, fellow rebel capitalists. It's 3rd through the 25th. Past speakers have included people like Robert Kiyosaki, Ron Paul, Peter Schiff, Mike Maloney, Lynn Alden, just to name a few. So to get your tickets ASAP and to find out who is speaking at this year's Rebel Capitalist Live, you can check it out at rebelcapitalistlive.com. And just a little quick insider information, if you get your tickets sooner than later, you can get a discount, because as we get closer and closer to the event, the tickets go up in price. So don't wait. Go to rebelcapitalistlive.com right now and get your tickets, and I will see you in Orlando, May 23rd through the 25th.